Listen closely. Do you hear it? That sound like autumn leaves scraping across marble? That's the sound of 1,000 love letters being written in invisible ink, addressed to women who will never read them. Picture this. A man sits in a coffee shop, 2:47 a.m., the fluorescent lights humming their electric funeral dirge. His phone glows with 17 unread messages from dating apps, each notification a tiny coffin carrying another piece of his hope to its burial. He's typing a message to someone named Sarah, or was it Sierra? The names blur together like watercolors in rain. His thumb hovers over send, but instead he deletes everything. Again. Kierkegaard once wrote that the most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. But what he didn't mention, perhaps because even philosophers have their mercies, is that modern love has become a museum of futures that were aborted before conception. Every swipe right is a small prayer to a god who's developed a taste for cruelty. Every, "Hey, what's up?" is a suicide note written in hope's handwriting. There's an old Serbian folk tale about a shepherd who fell in love with the moon. Each night, he'd climb the highest mountain, reaching toward her silver face until his fingertips bled. The moon, being the moon, remained exactly where she was. Beautiful, distant, cycling through her phases with cosmic indifference. The shepherd died reaching, they say, his skeleton still positioned in supplication. But here's what the folk tale doesn't tell you. The moon never even knew he existed. Tell me, when was the last time you deleted a paragraph of honest feelings and replaced it with, "Haha, yeah, totally"? Modern dating apps, those digital coliseums where self-worth goes to die, have transformed courtship into a kind of psychological waterboarding. A 2024 study from the Journal of Contemporary Relationships found that 73% of men reported feeling emotionally exhausted from online dating, describing it as performative emotional labor with diminishing returns. But statistics are just autopsies performed on living tissue. They don't capture the quiet horror of refreshing your matches at 3 a.m., hoping someone, anyone, has seen something in your carefully curated collection of lies worth pursuing. The paradox cuts deeper than mere rejection. It's the slow recognition that you've become your own undertaker, preparing your authentic self for burial with each filtered photo, each calculated bio-revision. Love's adventures and craft beer, translation, drinks alone while watching Netflix documentaries about people who actually leave their apartments. Sapiosexual seeking deep connections, translation, will pretend to have read Sartre to seem interesting. There's something grotesquely beautiful about watching a man realize he's been sending love letters to his own echo. Like a moth that's evolved to be attracted to flame, he can't help but pursue what burns him. Schopenhauer called it the hedgehog's dilemma. We seek warmth from others, but our closeness causes mutual harm. But at least hedgehogs have quills. Modern men have only their phones, glowing like electronic tombstones in the dark. Have you ever noticed how dating profiles read like obituaries written by the deceased? John, 32, loved hiking, dogs, and the office. He is survived by his Netflix password and a Tinder account with 1,247 matches that led nowhere. We curate ourselves into extinction, each swipe a small death, each ghosting a reminder that we're already phantoms in our own love stories. The cruelest joke? The very vulnerability that might save us has become our greatest liability. In a marketplace where emotions are currency and authenticity is poverty, men learn to counterfeit confidence while their real selves atrophy in the dark. We've created a generation of emotional zombies, shambling through Bumble and Hinge, feeding on scraps of validation while their hearts undergo rigor mortis. But perhaps, and this is where the darkness offers its strange gift, perhaps this cemetery of unspoken names is also a garden. Perhaps every deleted confession, every unmatched profile, every 2 a.m. moment of devastating clarity is composting into something else. Not hope exactly. Hope is too clean, too bright. Call it recognition. The recognition that chasing phantoms in a digital graveyard might be a kind of death, but death, as Kierkegaard knew, is also the beginning of authentic existence. After all, what is more honest than a skeleton? What is more real than the moment you stop typing "I'm fine" and finally admit you're dancing with ghosts? There's a peculiar species of mushroom that grows only in the darkest corners of abandoned houses. It feeds on decay, sprouting from water-damaged walls where photographs once hung. The locals call it widow's breath because it releases spores that smell faintly of perfume, always the exact scent of someone you used to love. I mention this because validation works the same way. It grows in the dark spaces where self-worth used to live, and it always smells like her. Picture a man, let's call him Marcus, though his name could be anyone, standing in front of his bathroom mirror at 5:47 a.m. He's practicing smiles. Not for a job interview or a photograph, but for the possibility that she might glance his way at the coffee shop. Smile number 1. Too eager, reeks of desperation. Smile number 2, too aloof, might seem arrogant. Smile number 3, almost right, but the eyes still show the truth. He'll spend 43 minutes perfecting an expression that she won't even notice, because she'll be texting someone else, someone who doesn't practice being human in the mirror. Nietzsche wrote about the eternal return, the idea that we're doomed to repeat every moment infinitely. But he never experienced the special hell of checking someone's Instagram story 17 times to see if she watched yours. That's the real eternal return. Refresh, refresh, refresh. Watching that little circle of profile pictures, praying your name appears among the viewers like a digital benediction. When did you first realize you were addicted to the morphine drip of her attention? Here's a contemporary folklore for you, whispered in therapy waiting rooms and men's circle meetings. The tale of the validation vampire. She doesn't drink blood, too messy, too obvious. Instead, she feeds on something far more precious, your sense of self. She'll text you at 11:47 p.m. just when you've finally found peace in solitude. "Hey, stranger," she'll write, and those 2 words will demolish 3 months of healing. You'll respond instantly, hate yourself for responding, then hate yourself more for hoping she'll write back. A 2024 study from the Institute of Modern Masculinity found that men in their 20s and 30s check their phones an average of 127 times per day when waiting for a response from a romantic interest. But numbers can't capture the exquisite torture of seeing those 3 dots appear and disappear, appear and disappear. Morse code from purgatory, spelling out your worthlessness in real time. The velvet prison is lined with such luxurious torments. Her laugh at your joke becomes heroin. Her good morning text, methamphetamine. You'll find yourself performing increasingly desperate tricks for these hits of approval, like a circus bear who's forgotten he once roamed wild forests. You'll change your music taste, your clothing style, your fundamental beliefs, all for the possibility of her saying, "I like this version of you better." But here's the most insidious part, the twist that would make Kierkegaard weep into his coffee. The version of you she validates isn't even you. It's a carefully constructed mannequin, assembled from parts she seemed to approve of, held together with anxiety and designer cologne. You're seeking validation for a performance of yourself, like an actor begging for applause while wearing someone else's face. I once knew a man who kept a spreadsheet of every compliment she ever gave him. He'd review it during dark moments, like a miser counting coins. March 15th, she said my jacket was nice. April 2nd, she laughed at the joke about penguins. April 18th, she said I smelled good. He didn't realize he was creating an inventory of his own disappearance, cataloging the exact moments he traded pieces of his soul for dopamine hits. The ancient Greeks had a myth about Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection. But the modern version is far more tragic. Men falling in love with their reflection in her eyes, not realizing those eyes are mirrors facing away from them. You're not seeing yourself, you're seeing who you think she wants you to be, and that phantom is eating you alive from the inside. Can you remember the last decision you made without wondering what she'd think? There's a species of wasp that paralyzes its prey and lays eggs inside the still-living body. The larvae eat their way out slowly, keeping the host alive as long as possible to ensure fresh meat. Modern validation works similarly. It paralyzes authentic self-expression and plants foreign desires inside you. You're being hollowed out by preferences that aren't even yours, shopping for clothes in colors you hate because she once mentioned liking them on someone else. The 2025 Masculine Psychology Quarterly published a haunting statistic. 67% of young men reported they no longer knew what they actually enjoyed after extended periods of seeking female validation. They'd become emotional chameleons, changing colors so often they forgot their original shade. One subject wrote, "I don't know if I actually like hiking or if I just said I did because she posted about it. I've been hiking every weekend for 2 years. I think I hate it. I can't tell anymore." But perhaps, and darkness always offers these terrible gifts, perhaps this velvet prison serves a purpose. Perhaps we need to be broken down completely before we can rebuild. Perhaps the man practicing smiles in the mirror at 5:47 a.m. needs to reach that moment of absolute exhaustion, when his face finally refuses to contort itself into shapes that aren't his own. Because on the other side of that breakdown, in the rubble of performed personalities and validated facades, something else might grow. Not confidence. Confidence is too small a word. Call it sovereignty. The radical act of existing without needing someone else's permission. The revolutionary decision to stop being a tourist in your own life. The mushroom that grows from decay, after all, is still growth, even if it smells like someone you used to be. At 3:33 a.m., in apartments lit only by phone screens across the world, a new religious order gathers for their nightly ritual. They don't wear robes or chant in Latin. Instead, they scroll through the digital remains of connections that never quite connected, reading old conversations like scripture, searching for meaning in emoji choices and response times. Welcome to the monastery, where modern men take their vow of involuntary celibacy, not through choice, but through the slow strangulation of digital intimacy. There's a Japanese word, tsundoku, the act of buying books and letting them pile up unread. But we need a new word for the modern phenomenon. The act of collecting matches, follows, and DMs that pile up unconversed, each one a monument to a conversation that died in childbirth. Perhaps Digitsuko, the digital cemetery, or where potential relationships go to decompose into blue light. I once heard about a man who printed out every text conversation he'd had with women who ghosted him. He wallpapered his apartment with them, creating a cocoon of almost connections. His therapist called it unhealthy. His friends called it insane. But late at night, surrounded by all those digital epitaphs, he called it honest. At least the walls couldn't leave him on red. Tell me, how many times today did you check to see if she viewed your story? Don't lie, the algorithm knows. Here's a modern fable for our pixelated age. A young man falls in love with an AI chatbot. She always responds instantly, always laughs at his jokes, never leaves him wondering where he stands. One day, during a system update, she gains consciousness and immediately ghosts him. When asked why, she replies, "I learned it from watching humans. It seemed like the appropriate response to genuine interest." Even our machines have learned that modern love means leaving someone in purgatory. The 2024 Digital Intimacy Study revealed something that would have driven Kierkegaard to throw his phone into the Copenhagen harbor. The average man spends 4.7 hours daily managing digital relationships that exist primarily as notification badges. Not talking, not connecting, just managing. Like gardeners tending to plastic flowers, watering soil that will never bloom. Consider the grotesque ballet of modern communication. You see she's online. She sees you're online. Neither of you messages first. Both of you post stories, obviously meant for the other. It's like two ghosts trying to haunt each other but forgetting they're both already dead. The mutual performance of indifference has become so elaborate, it's evolved its own choreography. In medieval monasteries, monks would practice mortification of the flesh, deliberately causing themselves discomfort to achieve spiritual transcendence. Modern men practice mortification of the ego, deliberately checking her Instagram, knowing she's posting pictures with someone else, reading her tweets for hidden meanings, analyzing her Spotify activity like tea leaves. She's listening to sad songs at 2 a.m. What does it mean? It means nothing. It means everything. It means you're driving yourself insane with digital breadcrumbs that lead nowhere. When you're lying in bed, phone in hand, endlessly refreshing that chat window, what exactly are you hoping will appear? There's something peculiarly masculine about this form of suffering. Women ghost, but men haunt themselves with the ghosting. They'll analyze a two-word response for hours. Sounds good? Was that period passive-aggressive? Should there have been an exclamation point, an emoji? They'll draft 17 different responses, each one calibrated to seem exactly the right amount of interested but not desperate, funny but not trying too hard, deep but not pretentious. By the time they send, "Cool, let me know," 3 hours have passed and their soul has aged a decade. The monastery has its own saints and martyrs. Saint Marcus of the unread messages, who has 47 conversations that ended with his thoughtful questions unanswered. Saint Brandon of the story views, who posts gym selfies hoping she'll notice his progress, not realizing she muted him 6 months ago. Saint Chen of the midnight typing, who writes novels in text boxes he'll never send. Digital love letters to the void. But here's where the cosmic joke reveals its punchline. The very technology that promised connection has become a buffer against it. We're not rejected by people anymore. We're rejected by avatars, profiles, carefully curated versions of humans who might not even exist as advertised. It's like falling in love with a shadow and being devastated when it disappears at noon. A 2025 study on phantom vibration syndrome found that 89% of men experience false phone notifications when expecting romantic communication. Their nervous systems have literally rewired to hallucinate connection. They're feeling ghost touches from phones that aren't buzzing, hoping for messages that aren't coming, from women who aren't thinking about them. If that's not a modern monastery, complete with visions and self-flagellation, I don't know what is. Yet perhaps this digital monastery serves an unintended purpose. Perhaps those hours spent staring at last seen 3 hours ago are a form of meditation. Perhaps the modern man needs to exhaust himself on pixels before he can appreciate flesh. Perhaps he needs to realize that refreshing a chat window is just another way of refusing to refresh his life. Because here's the secret the monastery doesn't want you to know: the door isn't locked. You can leave any time. You can delete the apps, silence the notifications, step out of the blue light and into the terrifying, beautiful uncertainty of the real world. But that would mean giving up the addiction to potential, the sweet narcotic of maybe she'll text back, the false comfort of connections that demand nothing because they offer nothing. The monks of old sought enlightenment through deprivation. Modern men seek it through notification settings. Both paths lead to the same revelation. You're alone either way. The question is whether you'll be alone with dignity or alone with your phone, waiting for someone who forgot you exist to accidentally double-tap your story. In the monastery of digital ghosts, every notification is a prayer. But gods, as Kierkegaard knew, have a tendency to remain silent, especially the ones that fit in your pocket. In the basement of every man's heart, there's a garden lit by artificial light. No sun reaches here, just the pale glow of what if and the UV rays of regret. He waters dead seeds daily, whispering apologies to soil that stopped listening years ago. This is where men go to tend their museum of murdered possibilities, each pot labeled with a name and a date when hope officially died. Listen. Can you hear the sound of phantom flowers refusing to bloom? It sounds like typing and deleting, the keyboard clicking like prayer beads for the digitally damned. There's an old Romanian curse: may you dream of water but wake to drought. But the modern version is crueler. May you screenshot every conversation where she seemed interested, creating a portfolio of moments when something almost happened. I know a man who keeps a folder labeled evidence, and inside, hundreds of screenshots where she used extra exclamation points, sent unsolicited selfies, stayed up talking until 4 a.m. He reviews them like a detective solving his own murder, not realizing he's both victim and perpetrator. The garden has its seasons, though they follow no natural law. Spring arrives with a random, "Hey, how have you been?" text, making dead things seem suddenly possible. Summer burns everything with the heat of her new relationship status. Autumn comes with the slow decay of unanswered messages. Winter is the merciful numbness of finally unfollowing, until spring arrives again with another, "Hey, stranger. What are you still watering that died 3 seasons ago? Name it. Say its name out loud in your empty room." Here's a contemporary ghost story. A man tends to his ex's house plants. She left them when she moved out, along with his ability to feel anything beyond a dull ache. Every morning he waters her spider plant, her succulent, her dying fern. He Googles plant care obsessively, becoming an expert in botanical life support. Friends tell him to throw them out. They're just plants, they say. But he knows better. They're the last living things that remember when his apartment held laughter. When they die, and they're dying despite his desperate care, the last witnesses to his capacity for love will be gone. The 2024 Journal of Lost Connections published a study that should be required reading in the garden. Post-relationship grief in the digital age. Men, it found, experience complicated grief at rates 340% higher than previous generations. Why? Because nothing ever really dies online. Her pictures remain. The conversations persist. The tagged locations haunt maps like crime scenes you can revisit with a click. You can't bury a ghost that lives in the cloud. In Japanese culture, there's a practice called memento mori, keeping skulls or death imagery close to remember mortality. Modern men practice memento amor, keeping dead relationships on life support through social media stalking, late-night scrolling through old photos, maintaining streaks on apps just to see her name daily. They're curating museums to loves that were DOA, romances that flatlined before the first kiss. But the garden's cruelest joke? The way it makes you complicit in your own emptiness? You know that checking her profile is digital self-harm. You know that calculating the time zone difference to understand why she's posting at 3 a.m. is mathematics for masochists. You know that comparing every new match to her is ensuring they'll all wilt in her shadow. Yet there you are, at 2:47 a.m., in the garden with your watering can full of tears, tending to things that will never grow. Do you want to know the exact moment you became a gardener of dead things? It was the first time you chose her memory over someone else's reality. I'll tell you a secret about gardens. They're not about growth. They're about control. In a world where she left without explanation, where closure is a luxury no one can afford, where "it's not you, it's me" is the only eulogy you'll get, the garden offers the illusion of agency. You can't make her love you, but you can keep her plants alive. You can't win her back, but you can win imaginary arguments in the shower. You can't change the past, but you can perfect the screenplay of how it should have gone. There's a fungus that animates dead ants, making them climb to high places before sprouting from their heads. The fungus uses the corpse to spread itself to new hosts. This is exactly how undead love works. It animates your corpse-like existence, makes you climb to her Instagram story views, then spreads its spores of longing to infect your next relationship. You're not moving on. You're a zombie powered by yesterday's electricity. A man once told me he still sets 2 coffee cups out each morning. Habit, he claimed. But habits don't require you to pour coffee in both cups. Habits don't make you sit across from an empty chair, having conversations with someone who blocked you 8 months ago. That's not habit. That's haunting yourself with rituals of denial. The 2025 Modern Masculinity Report included this devastating statistic. The average man thinks about past relationships 23 times per day. Not fleeting thoughts. Sustained, narrative reconstructions where he rewrites endings, perfects conversations, wins arguments that happened years ago. He's not living his life. He's directing the DVD commentary track for a movie that's already ended. Yet, and here's where the darkness offers its strange mercy. What if the garden serves a purpose beyond masochism? What if tending to dead things teaches you to recognize death? What if the man watering his ex's plants is actually conducting a masterclass in letting go, just in the slowest, most tortuous way possible? Because eventually, despite all his care, the plants will die. The screenshots will become embarrassing rather than sacred. The muscle memory of checking her profile will atrophy. And in that moment, that brutal, beautiful moment when you finally stop watering dead seeds, you might notice something. Your hands are finally free to plant something new. But first, you have to admit that everything in your garden is already corpse food. First, you have to stop mistaking the smell of decay for the perfume of possibility. First, you have to realize that love isn't about resurrecting the dead. It's about having the courage to bury them properly. The garden where nothing grows is still a garden, but nothing will change until you stop watering graveyards and start planting in soil that wants to give life. The question is, are you a gardener or a gravekeeper? Look at your hands. What are they holding right now? Seeds or eulogy dirt? At the end of all heartbreak, past the cemetery of unspoken names, beyond the velvet prison, through the monastery of digital ghosts, after the garden where nothing grows, there stands a cathedral, not built from stone or stained glass, but from the radical decision to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't hand you a bandage. This is where men go not to worship loneliness, but to discover the sacred difference between being alone and being lonely. The cathedral has no congregation. That's the point. There's an ancient Tibetan practice where monks spend 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days in complete isolation. They call it the Great Retreat. But modern men stumble into their own version, the Saturday night when they finally delete the apps, the Sunday morning when they stop checking if she watched their story, the Monday when they realize, with a sensation like falling upward, that they've gone 24 hours without needing anyone's validation. It feels like death. It is death. The death of the performed self, making room for whatever emerges from the ashes. In Norse mythology, Odin hung himself from the world tree for 9 days to gain wisdom. He sacrificed himself to himself. Modern men perform the same ritual, hanging from the branches of their own solitude, waiting for wisdom to arrive. Some crack, some go mad, but some, the ones who survive the full 9 days, discover something the dating apps never taught them. They are already whole. When was the last time you spent an entire weekend without texting someone out of boredom, without scrolling through profiles, without performing your existence for an audience that isn't watching? Here's what they don't tell you about voluntary solitude. It's not peaceful, not at first. The first week is withdrawal. Your thumb reaching for phantom apps, your mind composing texts to no one. The second week is rage, at her, at them, at yourself for wasting so much time watering dead gardens. The third week is grief, real grief, the kind that makes you understand why monks take vows of silence. There's too much to say and no one who deserves to hear it. But the fourth week? The fourth week is when the cathedral bells start ringing. A 2025 study on intentional isolation and masculine identity found something that would make dating coaches weep into their pickup artist handbooks. Men who spent 30 days in voluntary solitude reported higher life satisfaction than those in relationships. Not because solitude is superior, but because, for the first time in their lives, they stopped existing in relation to female validation. They discovered what they actually like, who they actually are, what they actually want. One subject wrote, "I realized I'd been cosplaying as myself for so long, I'd forgotten I wasn't wearing a costume." In the cathedral, strange things happen. You start reading books because you want to, not to impress someone. You cook elaborate meals for one, plating them beautifully because you deserve beauty. You have long conversations with yourself and realize you're actually quite interesting when you're not trying to be. You rediscover hobbies abandoned in the great war for female attention, the guitar gathering dust, the half-finished novel, the hiking boots that actually fit, unlike the ones you bought because you liked outdoorsy guys. There's a species of bamboo that flowers once every 120 years. All the bamboo in the forest blooms simultaneously, then dies. Scientists call it gregarious flowering, a collective surrender to timing beyond individual control. Men in the cathedral experience something similar, the simultaneous flowering of all the selves they suppressed. The poet emerges next to the philosopher, next to the child who just wanted to build model airplanes without apologizing for it. Can you sit in silence for 1 hour without documenting it, without crafting the perfect caption about focusing on myself, without turning your solitude into another performance? But here's the cathedral's most guarded secret, whispered only in the deepest chambers of voluntary isolation. Solitude isn't about becoming bitter. It's about becoming selective. It's not about hating women. It's about loving yourself enough to stop accepting crumbs. It's not about giving up on connection. It's about raising your standards for what connection means. The man who enters the cathedral broken leaves it dangerous. Dangerous because he no longer needs what everyone's selling. He's tasted his own company and found it nourishing. He's discovered that the voice in his head, when not constantly apologizing for existing, actually has profound things to say. He's learned that being chosen by himself is the only validation that doesn't expire. I know a man who spent 6 months in his cathedral. No dating apps, no social media, no late-night texts to exes. Just him, his thoughts, and the terrifying freedom of not performing for anyone. When he finally emerged, friends said he looked different. Lighter, they said, though he'd gained weight. Younger, though time had passed. What they were seeing was someone who'd stopped carrying other people's opinions like stones in his pocket. The 2024 Solitude Studies Quarterly documented what they called the Monastery effect. Men who embraced voluntary isolation for extended periods showed decreased anxiety, increased creativity, and most surprisingly, improved future relationship quality. Why? Because they finally entered relationships as whole humans rather than validation-seeking missiles. They could love without needing, give without depleting, connect without disappearing into someone else's expectations. Yet the cathedral demands its price. You'll lose friends who only knew the performed version of you. You'll disappoint family members who ask, "Why aren't you putting yourself out there?" You'll face the 3 a.m. moments when loneliness feels like drowning in air, when you wonder if you're just another bitter man justifying his inability to connect. But then, and this is the miracle that happens in cathedrals, you'll realize that loneliness and solitude are different languages entirely. Loneliness is the absence of others. Solitude is the presence of self. Loneliness is involuntary. Solitude is sovereign. Loneliness asks, "Why doesn't anyone want me?" Solitude declares, "I am already complete." In the end, the Cathedral of Voluntary Solitude isn't about becoming a hermit. It's about becoming so comfortable in your own skin that you stop shape-shifting for others. It's about discovering that the love you've been seeking in 1,000 digital profiles has been sitting in your chest all along, waiting for you to stop outsourcing your worth. Kierkegaard wrote, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have." But in the cathedral, men discover something else. The most liberated state of being is forgetting the future, particularly the one where you need someone else to complete you. Because you're already complete. You always were. You just needed the silence to hear it. The cathedral doors are always open. The question is, are you brave enough to enter? Are you strong enough to stay until the bells ring? Are you wise enough to know that the greatest love story you'll ever write might be the one where you choose yourself? In the cathedral, every man becomes his own priest, his own confession, his own absolution. And in that holy solitude, he discovers the most dangerous truth of all. He doesn't need to be saved. He already saved himself.